Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the great adventure all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. Hey, I'm happy to have you here today, folks. We've got an old friend joining us today, Andrew Greer, Enneagram Type 2, author, musician, filmmaker. He's published 3 books, released multiple chart-topping recordings. Guy's a great songwriter, and he's directed the PBS documentary Plain Spoken, a film inspired by the lives of Jimmy and Rosalind Carter. And he has a brand new book out called More Than a President, Sundays with Jimmy Carter. And this is where he's gone through and meticulously cataloged all of President Carter's Sunday school lessons, 40 years worth. And he brings 15 lessons from the president's historic tenure of teaching Sunday school to this book. Really, really cool. We're so glad he's on the show. As I said, he's a Type 2, and we get into all things Type 2 today and things Type 1, as we think Jimmy Carter is a Type 1, so Enneagram Type 1. So fun interview. You're going to love this. We get some behind the scenes stuff, some real sweet experiences that Andrew got to have with President Carter. So glad you're here today, folks. That's it for me, Anthony Skinner. And now, without any further ado, here is the man of the hour, Ian Cron.
Hey, Typology friends, welcome back to the podcast on which we explore all things Enneagram, all things personality, all things the human adventure. Today, an old friend of mine is here, Andrew Greer, Enneagram 2, author of the new book, More Than a President, Sundays with Jimmy Carter. And Andrew and I haven't spoken to each other in about 4 years. We have a mutual friend, songwriter, artist, Cindy Morgan, who we both adore and love. And I am stoked for this conversation, A, to catch up with you, B, because I want to talk about Jimmy Carter and Enneagram One to the max. Andrew, welcome.
A perfectionist to the max. God help us all.
God help us all. Okay. Well, let's start with you. You're an Enneagram 2. I was just thinking about your energy when we came on. Anthony, you picked up on it, right? Like literally your face was like this.
Yes.
When you came on, which is, and for those of you who can't see me, I have a big smile. I've got my face up toward the camera, so it's sort of filling the screen. This is a very 2 sort of self-presentation. This energy of moving toward others in relationship. This feeling like of let's connect, let's be together. It's very caffeinated. It's very fizzy. It's got a fizzy kind of quality to it, right?
Yeah, occasionally a bite.
Yeah, sometimes. And then sometimes it also masks a lot of feelings that are darker. So I recently had an Enneagram 2 confess to me this. They said, and it was a man, he said, Enneagram 2s are often misunderstood because behind our obsession with relationships, there is a great deal of loneliness. And I'm wondering, let's go right out of the box with a hard question. Is that your experience as an Enneagram 2? Is there kind of a core of loneliness?
Well, for sure. I think I operate, at least in regard to the art I've been able to be a part of, participate in, or what has inspired me about art and then propelled me to create art in my own way as a songwriter, filmmaker, whatever I put my hands to. I would say, Ian, that the core motivation is not trying to quell the loneliness, but is actually trying to understand loneliness. And maybe those go hand in hand. I don't know. But yes, I mean, what my friends tell me, if I'm in a place where maybe I've had too much going on, I have few margins, I'm getting a little edgy, I need some time to myself, I need some solitude, but they are always warning me, my therapist, my friends, my family, of tipping over into isolation. In fact, some of my dearest friends will say, do not play the playlist on my Apple Music that is the longest and most well-curated playlist is simply called Sad.
Oh, that's interesting.
And my go-to when I'm out of margins, when I'm out of relational capital, or when I feel like I've given all of my capital and no one's given me any back, is I'm going to go take a long drive on some back roads to maybe go hike or find some, backwoods local coffee shop and really just stew in my feelings. And I'm going to have, strains of sad saturate me for the day. I'm going to give myself permission for a little while to simply feel alone.
So interestingly, Beatrice Chestnut calls the heart triad the sadness triad, because 2s, 3s, and 4s, again, another core emotion is sadness. So grief is behind 2, 3, and 4, because all three of them believe they can't be loved for who they are. So each has to project a particular image to win over others and to find relationship that bolsters their kind of lifelong struggle with self-worth.
Well, I think about being a child even, sadness, to your point or to your observation, sadness was not circumstantial for me. I grew up in an extremely stable, now that I look back and see all these other families, or now that I'm interacting as an adult in my communities and with other families, I realize how stable, how high functioning my family really was. So it wasn't a huge family root issue there or some family of origin thing. I would go walk around like at recess. I was not unpopular. I had friends and I had good friends, and I felt like I largely had a sense of place and belonging growing up. But I would walk the perimeter of the playground, say like 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, while everyone else was playing kickball or whatever, not because no one wanted me to play, but because I found some solace, some comfort in a break in my day, perhaps because I was expending myself or overthinking or overdoing, even in the classroom as a kid, to either be the best friend or best student, to not be in anybody's way, right? Or not cost them anything, not burden them with anything. And Ian, I'm still doing that to this day. I mean, in my last therapist session, we talked about some truths in my life that I don't want to burden others with. And my therapist said, but why can't they have some of the burden? That's just part of relationship.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, as you know, 2s typically don't like to admit personal needs. So to ask for help maybe is kind of in play here. And though the way that 2s will rationalize that is, I don't want to bother other people with my problems, right? But the dark side of it, when a 2 gets really honest and does their work, is, and part of it is pride. I don't want others to know I have personal needs. I want to focus all my energy on theirs, which gives me a kind of feeling of superiority because others are more needy than I am.
I definitely want to be, at times, I want to be in the helper position to be in a dominant position, for sure. If I'm really weighing out my heart or my motives in that situation. Now, do I think at the core of me, the desire to help is so that I can step on people? No, I want to dig down deep and do the work to lift others up high. I think that's that's a part of my belief set. It's a part of my spirituality. But I do think it feels better for me to be in the position to give rather than be actually in a need of receiving what others have to give to me. I remember, one of your podcasts, it was called Hold My Beer, that I was on about one of your episodes years ago. For 2s, here, hold my beer. That's the thing,
So is that a control thing? Like, is it, if I'm helping, I'm in control? And what is it specifically you want to be in control of?
Well, it certainly sounds like control and it feels like control. So it's got to be to some degree control. I think what I want to be in control of is not being hurt. I don't want to feel that feeling at all costs. And so, I'm always jumping in relationships 2 to 3 steps ahead of where we're even at, having conversations that are not, this is not on the timeline yet, so that I can keep that potential, that possibility, that risk of being hurt at bay, which means what I crave is intimacy, and I tend to reject it or to distance it, a lot of times on my personality. It's like those hugs you give when you put one hand behind someone's back and then they put the other hand to your chest, kind of like we're not going to fully embrace.
Yeah, so it seems like twos are magical when it comes to anticipating the needs of others in advance of that person even having them. Like my assistant, Wendy, and she's listening right now because she listens to every single podcast before they go out, and she's amazing. She's an Enneagram 2 with a very strong 1 wing, and which I'm just telling everybody right now, if you're looking for an executive assistant, trust me, you want an Enneagram 2 with a strong 1 wing, right? And part of the reason is that she anticipates problems that I'm going to have 2 weeks from now. Or like she is looking so far down the road to head off problems and to meet needs that don't even exist yet, but surely will in about 2 weeks, which I'm sure is a lot of work when it comes to trying to help somebody like me with papers falling out of my bag and, trying to keep me on course.
Well, I think anticipation for sure. Like you're saying, it makes us great assistants, great helpers, great right-hand men and women, great partners in a lot of ways, right? I do have the energy to help. I do want to help. I want to see others have more time, more space, more margin for their feelings, for their hobbies, for, I like curating a space where someone has opportunity. I just forget that I also require, as a human being, of value, of worth, beloved, just at zero, that I also, I guess I want to say require. I'm struggling to say deserve, but maybe that's the right word, is to deserve a time and space myself and things to enjoy without having certain obligations impinge on that. But someone we'll get to this, I know, in the conversation, but I now live in a small town called Plains, Georgia, which is 500 people. And a friend just the other day who lives in Plains said, well, what did Plains do before Andrew Greer? And I beg them to answer that, please try. But, there can be so much self-importance in that, Ian.
Yes.
And I really don't want to have that intensity of pride, or that deep of pride. I want to gradually, I want to humble myself. Humility for me is to put myself in a position to receive, and to be grateful about it and relaxed about it and not return anything for it.
Mm-hmm. And how have you grown in that regard since I last saw you in the last 4 years, let's say?
Well, I had some pretty traumatic events in regards to what I wanted to diminish as benign, because it was in professional relationships. It was in more, company world, some work life of mine that really imploded. Some of my friends, I'm a therapist, and family have all encouraged me to give that the weight, that it deserved in how it affected me. It doesn't matter how someone else perceives it or how it looks on paper, but how it affected me was really losing some of my sense of maybe sense of value or usefulness, or also that I didn't make the best decisions going into it, which resulted in something that I should have seen, right? I don't know if I could have seen it when I first got into bed with these partners. I don't, that's a shame message somewhere. I should have known that this wasn't going to work. I should have listened to my gut feeling. Well, I was 33 and learning, and now I'm 43 and know something, So I've had to, two things in answer to your question. One is I learned some things about myself. I am not someone who desires scaling things. Money is not a motivator for me. I am a true creative, and it has taken me years to go, okay, yes, I can organize some things and I can execute some things, but I am a creative. I need space. I need margin. I need to be able to sit with my feelings without a full schedule to offer what I believe is mine to offer into the world, to intersect, with the world, with what I, with the fields that I've chosen to put my plow to. So, learning some things about myself in regards to business, which is sort of unsexy, but then also learning that I am my father's son. My dad, my brothers and my mom and I would be buzzing around the house with productivity, or our weekends would be full with this and that. And my dad would be sitting on the porch or in his chair, just perfectly content for it to be a weekend. And this was when he was my age, and we looked at him like he was some wild animal, like how in the world could you feel the permission to just relax? And I sit on my front porch in Plains. I'm in my house now. And I remember one Saturday, my neighbor came over, talked for about 60 minutes, and then someone pulled into my driveway because they saw us on the porch. They hung out for the next 60 to 90 minutes. And then someone else came and pulled into my yard, and they came and sat. And my whole afternoon was spent literally just sitting and being present with the people who were in front of me. And I couldn't think of a better day.
I was about to say, yeah,
one achievement that can top that.
That's a very, very 2-ish and 9-ish kind of heaven, right? Like it's that 2 where you're just connecting all day. You're just connecting with people all day. And, one of the things I'd say that I've learned about 2s, and 2s, particularly social 2s, can be very ambitious. They can look like 3s and sometimes like 8s. They're very go get 'em, and they use relationships as a currency. But one thing I do know about them, particularly this would be true with self-pres 2s, that they are very suggestible. So you have to tell a 2 in a business transaction sometimes, you need a lawyer. Because they're overly trusting. And they'll be like, sure, you just want to be together and do this really cool thing. And then, 2 years later, you realize that somebody ran off with your publishing. You know what I mean? And it's like, is that, so you mean by suggestible, like they can be easily manipulated?
Oh yeah. I was manipulated in this situation. And I had sensations that could happen, with especially one individual. I didn't have 100% trust from the beginning, or my spidey senses were working. But I am a trusting person. I prefer to trust at the cost of some of my health than to be cynical. And that's not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to be cynical to be realistic about who you're dealing with. For someone to not be trustworthy doesn't mean I'm not a trusting person, right? Mm-hmm. That's all kind of in my, shaken up snow globe. It's all just swirling around, trying to understand myself in relationship with others. I think what I learned most was to trust myself, the layers of myself that are speaking to me, not just the ideal of myself that I want to be perceived as trusting, or to believe in all people. Like I don't live in a fairy tale. Something's deeply broken within the strains of how we live. And I'm learning to be okay with recognizing something is broken. And that doesn't mean I don't value that person as a person who also has worth and is deserving of love. But that doesn't mean they're always deserving of my space.
So it sounds like you've learned something in the last few years about healthy boundaries.
Learning, yes, I am learning and continually testing myself or challenging myself with my own personality's need to overstretch or overdo or overhelp, whatever you want to say. But yeah, again, a town of 500 people versus a town of however many Nashville is now. Moving from Nashville was not a divorce from Nashville. I didn't lose my love for Nashville. I didn't lose my community in Nashville. I still have family. I mean, I will never be divorced from Nashville. It's just when I came to Plains, which was through a work project, through filming a documentary, which allowed me the work of filming a documentary, right, takes time and it takes patience and it takes being a part of the fabric of the subjects that you're filming. I just got reconnected to a part of myself that I remember from growing up. I grew up in a small town in Texas, not 500 people, but several thousand. And I realized everyone went home at night and they didn't call you outside of an emergency because they were in their safe space for that. They needed their recharge. They needed their solitude. They needed their family unit. They needed whatever is provided by a culture that has boundaries. So because I struggle with boundaries in and of myself, with my own vices and such, a town like Plains, a community, a people, and a pace like Plains offers me an opportunity to find some of that within the infrastructure. I'm not constantly, pressed against, to be unboundaried, because people around here have boundaries. They know how to say no. No is like a total nice thing to say around here. You know what else I found is when we were getting together for something, let's say we're playing dominoes or we're going out to eat or whatever, someone in the text strain, in the group text might say, can't tonight, right? And also, P.S., we don't text each other about tonight's plans, if we even have a plan for tonight yet, until 3 hours beforehand. I mean, blowing my mind, right? That I don't
This is
have
all
to
in
think
Plains we're talking about,
ahead.
right?
This is in Plains. Plains. And so we're on a group text and someone says, I can't tonight. Well, we're a 1 mile radius. Their car is in their driveway. And they didn't go park it somewhere else so that you wouldn't know that they just simply did not want to go tonight. They may be binging something. They may be sleeping early. I don't know. It doesn't matter. And you know what? No one cares. No one thinks they owe an explanation. No one thinks that they're, well, they didn't come out because, they got a little sideways with so-and-so. It's like, they just said no. They're just not going tonight. We're adults. It's like I landed in an adult land.
Well, I wouldn't say Nashville is an adult place. I mean, I'd say it's a little, it's turned into fairyland. It's turned into a strange, we remember Nashville, all three of us, when it was just such a cool, gritty town filled with stories, so many stories about artists and, not just well-known artists, but, songwriters and musicians and people doing interesting things and quirky people and eccentrics and, just great stories, hanging out at Dotson's in Franklin and sitting next to, could be Vince Gill, it could be somebody else, and just telling stories over coffee, and then, of course, it's turned into this sort of tourist trap where it's like this artificial version of Nashville is now what people consume, right? It's like Nashville for consumption, for purposes of consumption. I kind of missed that gritty old day. Maybe I'm going to move to Plains.
I do have to say one of my favorite things about your story is that the two options were dominoes or going out to eat. We may be playing dominoes or going out to eat.
Yes. And Anthony, if we're going out to eat, that's a bit of a pilgrimage. We don't go out to eat in town. That's a good 30 minutes away.
Right. Yeah.
So that does take a little planning, but you guys would be welcome in Plains anytime. Ian, when you were expressing all that, I'm thinking about the two of you, Anthony, Ian, in the context of quirky people and artistic people and community people. And community doesn't survive if it's only for the sake of consumption. And so I also needed to be where community didn't do the same thing I did. I needed to be, and they don't do the same thing as I do. And I needed to find interest again, intrigue again, and that there's a whole wide world of people with a lot of different desires and thoughts and beliefs. It's strange that here in a small rural town, and sure, some of this could be the influence of that two of our most famous residents were President and Mrs. Carter, sure. But President and Mrs. Carter were Jimmy and Rosen were shaped by Plains. They did not create Plains. They were shaped by the people that came before them who were Plains people. And I think largely was why they continued to return here until the day they died. The only house they ever owned is right down the street from me. And that's the house they died in as well. So you're talking about a fabric of community, a fabric of people, and a diversity of people. I actually find more diversity of thought, beliefs, lifestyles, family makeup, etc., in this 1 mile radius than I found, at least honestly, or spoken about in the communities I lived in Nashville. Again, no criticism. Big cities are big cities. It is a big city, and that's going to have its own temperature.
Well, I think as a younger man, Nashville was interesting because it's a city where people are on the make. And honestly, right, they're hustling. They're hustling music, their art, their crafts, their careers. And it's a place where, I remember the first time I came to Nashville was 1994 with a cassette with a demos of songs to meet with guys at Atlantic Records when it was still here. And it was a place where you came to make a name. And as you get older, that becomes less of a priority. As you get older, you move past the achievement stage of life. And that's a great relief, right? It's like, I've already done that. I was out the other day with a guy and he was talking about his business and he looked at me across this table and he said, he was talking about a deal that he was trying to get done. And he goes, "Man, I'm hungry." And I was like, that's pretty self-aware. Like, in other words, you have this kind of deep hunger to make a name and to leave a mark on the world. And when you kind of I'm just moving out of that stage, where I feel like I'm out of it, but just out of it at my age. And it's like, God, it takes a lot of stress and pressure off, a lot of stress and pressure kind of goes away. And you start to focus more on your soul than on your resume.
Yes. Well, that's a wonderful way to say it. And, to that end, I remember talking to my dad about the idea of moving to Plains. I did this over the course of a few years. It was very natural in the way it happened. It wasn't just to pick me up and go. But I said, is that odd? Is that strange? I mean, I think all those messages of accumulation and achievement or accumulation and accomplishment are so ingrained in those of us who have had to pursue our own, professions, our own art, our own way of distributing it, getting it into the hands of people. That's a large and a big job. More and more people are doing that. So it's more understandable now. But I just kind of felt that part of me resisting a little bit what I really wanted. And what I wanted was to be known by the people who I live next to. And my dad said, Andrew, he said, your mom and I felt similar to this when we moved to Azle, which is the little town I grew up in. And my parents had metropolitan professions. My dad's a therapist. My mom was a classical organist for years and then a music educator. And he said, if we're lucky, there's a couple times in our lives where the people and the place marry with us to put our souls at ease or our souls at rest. And he said, when that happens, we just have to go. And I think that is a part of the fabric of this place. I think it is a part of the evolution of my own life that I just don't want to work to achieve. I want to work out of desire of this is what I have and what I can offer. But what it does, how it measures itself within society's standards, I just am not in control of, number one. And number two, I just don't give a you-know-what about anymore. It's so much so, I was at an award show like 2 weeks ago. I should make up a time so that people can't timestamp it and know which one. But I was at the Dove Awards, guys, and I did not want to be there. I don't have any.
I have been at the Dove Awards with you before.
I know you have. You have won. You have won Dove Awards.
No, well, I just remember you at the Dove Awards and how, like a typical two, I mean, you were just so plugged into so many different people all at once. And so it's hard for me to imagine you not wanting to be there.
Well, yeah, I mean, God help that young man that you saw. It's not for a lack of loving people. Even, I weighed out my feelings for the few days afterwards. I gave myself some time to think about it instead of just be like, bad taste in my mouth. It had nothing to do with the award show. It had nothing to do with the music or the artists or anything that was represented. In fact, when I look above things or bigger picture, I thought it was really well done. But that is just not my space anymore. And owning that and being okay with that without it being a criticism of anyone else. And so I'm still the guy who loves all those people or loves anyone who walks in the room and cherishes them and wants them to succeed and all of that. I just don't want to, silver spoons just don't have a draw for me anymore. I don't want to have to say please and thank you at just the right times. And I don't want to have to get dressed up and look just so.
They get dressed up for them Dove Awards. There's some dress up at
you
those
don't,
things.
Ian.
No, not me, baby. Do you remember that story?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I have a line that I wish I had said. So the only time I've ever won a Dove Award, you remember this, right? Like we were up against, I can't remember who we were up against, it was for Inspirational Song of the Year, and I co-wrote that song with Cindy Morgan, and I was convinced we weren't going to win. So I was going to go to New York, and Cindy's like, no, you got to stay. You got to stay. You got to come. And I'm like, we are not going to win this. There's just we're not, And she, at the last minute, I decided to go, but I wore like these really ratty jeans and this orange shirt untucked, just like an orange button down that was untucked. And everybody there is like, Southern gospel people, man, they know with the big hair and the whole thing. And then you've got the 80s stars of Christian music that are still dressed like they're in the 80s, but now they're dyeing their hair. And then you've got, all the contemporary young kids running around. And when they called our name to win that song, I remember going up and thinking, this is what you wear when you are convinced that you are not going to win a Dove Award. and I wish I had said that when I got up there, because I was flummoxed. I had no idea what to say. Thankfully, I didn't say anything completely and utterly offensive or wrong that I recall. But that was one of those incredible surprise Nashville moments. I've had two of those in my life. Big surprise moments that I'm like, okay, only in Nashville. And that was one of them right there.
Yes, yeah. And there's a goodness to that, right?
Oh, yeah. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. Everybody makes fun of a Dove Award until they get one. And then they're like, oh, no, it's very serious. Hey, friends, it's Ian. Over the years, I've heard from so many of you, listeners, readers, folks on the journey with me, who have said, I wish I could sit down with you for a few minutes and ask you more about my type, or to talk through something I'm wrestling with, or to get some guidance on how to grow. So I've decided to open up a very limited number of 30-minute one-on-one Zoom coaching sessions. This is a chance for you and I to talk directly, just you and me, about whatever would be most helpful for you right now. And that could be getting clarity about your Enneagram type, how to navigate a stuck place in your story, how to grow in emotional and spiritual maturity, how to take the next right step in your life. We can go wherever the conversation needs to go. Now, each session is $150 and spots will be extremely limited so I can give each person my full attention. If this sounds like something you'd benefit from, you can sign up at the link in the show notes or in my Instagram bio. You could also reach out to my assistant Wendy at ianmorgancron.com. So whether you're brand new to the Enneagram or you've been at this work for a long time, sometimes a short, focused conversation can unlock something important. So if you're feeling that tug, let's talk. I'd love to spend that time with you. Anyway, I want to talk about the book. Okay. I want to talk about more.
Yes.
This book is really amazing, right? It's the title of the book is More Than a President: Sundays with Jimmy Carter. Tell me about, very quickly, what the premise of the book is. Then I want to talk about Carter because I have some thoughts about Carter. I want to see if you can validate them.
Sure. The premise of the book is very specific to one segment of his life, which he comes from a long line of readers, researchers, and people like lay teachers. And so, and actually some who have also been educators as a profession. But the way that presented in his life is that he taught a Sunday school class from the time he was a young man, when he was in the Navy, when he came back to Plains and was a peanut farmer, when he was president of the United States. In the White House, the church they just happened to attend, the Sunday school director asked if he would sub some. Of course, they couldn't advertise that, at that point because of all the security measures, but they did have the good resources to record it well. And that was in the 70s into the early 80s. And then for 40 years, he had a historic tenure when he came back home to Plains and then began working out of Plains around the world with the Carter Center. He would teach on average half of the Sundays in a year. He might have been in Libya the night before. He might have been in Ghana the night before. Like the level of commitment, which is what I always hallmark, is pretty amazing for someone who has achieved arguably the most powerful position in the world. And this is in an A-frame church that can maybe seat 200, 250 people in our little town of 500, 600 people, Maranatha Baptist Church, just down the road from where I'm sitting now. And so this book, More Than a President, I went through hundreds of his lessons and found ones that I thought had subject matter or themes that were relatable to our own conversations we're having today. It is strange, right, how our conversations really don't change that much in regards to how we treat one another and who are we in the big scheme of things. And so I picked out 15 of those, made 15 chapters along with Mercer University Press here. I wrote introductions to contextualize what were the Carters doing in their lives at home or around the world that presented or expressed some of the insights he was also gleaning from this ancient text that was so important to him to show how does this play out, in when the rubber meets the road. And so that kind of volley, Barbara Brown Taylor, who I'm sure you know and who I adore, she wrote the foreword and then his grandson wrote the afterword. But just a deep honor for me because Jimmy Carter is one of my heroes. Why he is one of my heroes. They were in the White House just before I was born, early on in the Reagan era. So I never really knew them as much as politicians, just former politicians. But I began to learn about when he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. That's when I began to read some of his works, learn about his relationships in the Deep South with Black people, how those were some of the most influential people in his life growing up in the 1920s and 30s, that kind of intrigue and the Americana way that he wrote about his early life that then influenced the way he saw people of all different nationalities, religions, etc. in his later life. It just drew me in. And so Sunday school, anyone could come. You had to go through Secret Service, get wand and all that. And you could take a picture with Jimmy and Rosalind if you stayed for church. So go to Sunday school, stay for church, which just has an organ and a piano and the little choir, and you can take a picture. I did that whole thing as a 24-year-old just out of college with some willing fools of friends who didn't know what they were getting into. And over time, that connected me with this place until I did the documentary for PBS and then did this book. So that's a whole lot that connected me to this place and to the Carters.
Yeah, in the Enneagram world, when people ask, name a famous one, probably the most famous, the one that always comes up is Jimmy Carter. Now, there are others, right? But Jimmy Carter surely was a one, but not the perfectionist, certainly an improver, but really the reformer type of one. The one that is very concerned about unfairness, about injustice, about wanting to right wrongs, and very importantly, to repair systems that are broken, that oppress or marginalize the poor, the disenfranchised, people that have no voice. And it seems to me that was what Jimmy Carter was really about. And he has so many hallmarks of one. It's very interesting. We were talking right before we hit record, and I want to revisit the topic. What made Jimmy Carter a great post-presidency human being is probably what made him at times less than awesome president. And that is, as a one, he was a micromanager. So in other words, this is why I oftentimes say that nines make the best presidents, right? They're deal makers. They know how to get people to have consensus. They know how to listen to people. They can see all perspectives, honor all perspectives, see the merits of different perspectives, right? The problem with ones is, for example, around issues of policy, they will get down into the actual documents and move commas around if they're not correct, right? And he, of course, was... Go ahead.
It's funny you say that, because there are many stories about him sending back a bill or something after reading it and having no real comment about the substance of it, but editing grammar.
Right. Yeah. Did you know? Here's a story, and I think it's true. I don't think this is just anecdotal. So the White House has tennis courts. And Jimmy Carter was a big tennis player, right? Like he really enjoyed playing tennis. Now you would think that there's someone somewhere in the White House in charge of scheduling who uses the tennis court when, but supposedly Carter managed who played when, like he managed the tennis court.
That's right.
Is that true? Have you heard that story?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. And all the stories of him, and really these stories came out with the people who were around him and his cabinet and his administration, who loved and respected him on levels that remained until the day he died or until the day they died. But one of their critiques was how in the weeds he got, and that he would read every word of every piece of legislation that came across his desk. How does a president even do that? Now, his extreme discipline helped him to do that without absolutely dissolving as a human being. But did it help in that kind of overarching need for what our president of the United States should be? Maybe not. And as we talked about, that hyper-focus, that attention to detail, from that desire to repair, to seek justice, for others, became the hallmark of his post-presidency and his humanitarianism.
Yeah. So you have a guy, he's highly analytical. He's an engineer, right? He was known for personally reviewing federal budget line items. Like, if anyone has any idea of how many thousands of pages there are in a federal budget, right? Most presidents have to be masters of delegation, right? I would imagine that some presidents, other people come up with policy, the president listens and then says move forward, but not until, they have a good sense, but they're not necessarily going to read everything. They're given bullet points, they're told what to say, all this stuff. But this is not so with Jimmy Carter, right? Like he would, I'm told, keep copious notes on everything. And this is, again, very one-ish behavior, very, as you mentioned, discipline.
Well, and here's an example that I didn't think about until just now as you're talking. When I began researching for this book, of course, he was still alive, but I was given a binder that was up at their house that had, so when he lost his reelection to presidency, came home to Plains, he had taught Sunday school again at First Baptist Church of Washington, at the city of Washington, D.C., I don't know, 24 times, let's say, over the course of his presidency. When he got home, he had those recordings transcribed. He went back and read through the transcript just for his own personal use, read through the transcriptions, made notes on those. There was no use for those. There was nothing, no project coming out. There was no reason for that anyone would understand outside of him. And those were given to me for research, which of course were priceless. But even that kind of act of note-taking, if you will, or of organizing, rearranging, revisiting, and yet he had, I think, a disdain for waste. And yet it's funny how our personalities work for us and against us, right? Do I think he was resourceful? Yes. He saved, our national parks expanded by doubled. Teddy Roosevelt's considered the father of national parks, and Jimmy Carter's essentially the son of it because of how he saved so much land, conserved so much. That benefits us now. But how does that conservation personality also end up impinging on the resource of your time and how it could be better used, or how someone else could take over there? I mean, I get some of that as a two, right, as well. It's a little bit that hold my beer thing. I'll do that. I'll take care of that. I need to be in the weeds of it to some degree.
So there you have it, right? Like this quintessential one reformer. And by the way, the person who most, even though they're very different, and this has nothing to do with anything except personality. The only other person in politics that I can think of that most kind of mirrors that kind of behavior is Hillary Clinton.
Huh. Yeah. Interesting.
Was too concerned with the weeds of things, too policy wonky, which made her not very attractive to voters, right? Because it was too nerdy. She would just talk about healthcare, and
I mean, my gosh, President Carter told everyone to turn their thermostats down in the winter to conserve it. Is it the right thing for the environment and for our grandchildren and their children? Yes. But is that what people want to hear? No. And so it's an American issue, but
well, it's so interesting you should say that, because one of the things he was known for was always turning down the thermostats in the White House and wearing sweaters.
That's right.
And that's also very one in terms of doing the right thing, and also frugality. Being, the fact that he went back to that home, right? Where he could, the
only one they've ever owned.
Clearly could have lived more opulently, but chose simplicity, right? Being principled, humble, spiritually grounded, quietly competitive, I'm told, but disciplined,
for sure.
Right? But very, very disciplined. Like, you had to come into meetings well prepared, because that guy had done all the reading. You were not catching him up on anything. He was all caught up.
Yes, and to that end, the Camp David Accords, which is still the only lasting peace agreement in the Middle East, which is some of what he won the Nobel Peace Prize for. The Egyptian president during his presidency, Anwar Sadat, and then Prime Minister Menachem Begin, Israel's prime minister, won the Nobel Peace Prize for the Camp David Accords. But it took his attention to detail for President Carter to single-handedly for 13 days mediate a peace agreement between Egypt, an Arab nation, and Israel. To even have the respect, those two men said these should have been named the Jimmy Carter Accords. So not to any lack of respect for President Carter, but that oneness also achieved some things too. So it is interesting. I guess that's the plus and minuses of our personality. But to some degree, I think by the end of his life, he was probably proud for where he got in the weeds and achieved some lasting things rather than make everybody feel good. Right. With his rhetoric.
Well, so here's another interesting thing about Jimmy Carter and Ones, and that is he was known for having a very calm demeanor, and that his anger was rarely on parade. Like his anger was very repressed, pushed down, and that is very one stuff, right? Now, he could, because of the kind of one that he was, he could become angry over injustice or unfairness, because that is the right thing to do, right? It's all about the one wants to be virtuous. They want to be good. They want to be principled. They want to be ethical. They want to be fair. They want to be just. They want to make a better world. They want to improve things. And so when things are out of whack, it's okay to get visibly angry and express anger. That's kind of a nice release valve. But in general, those ones push anger down. And so there's a kind of calmness, a kind of evenness of personality. Was that your experience with him?
I think so. I mean, one, my research of him, but then now, my experience with Jimmy and Rosalind Carter were in their later years, which, for all of us, that doesn't change our personality, but it transforms us into older people. I mean, she was 96 when she passed away and he was 100. You are going to evolve and transform in some of it. Plus, when your body begins to shift and begin after traveling and pursuing things at such dogged levels, such determined levels for 95 plus years, then things are going to begin to shift even in your personality, However, I will say, even at his older age, I remember one time at church, and I, of course, because this is one of my heroes, so any chance I can get to have a conversation or spend time where it's unsolicited, I'm there, I'm for it. So she's sitting on the front pew and he's sitting right next to her. He was already at that point sitting in a wheelchair. He would walk in, but sit in a wheelchair. It was not as stable on his feet. And so I'm kneeling, on the floor, just having a conversation with one of my heroes, right? In this totally unpretentious and relaxed environment. But I was also playing the piano that Sunday, and the prelude starts at a certain time. And I was talking to him when the prelude was to already have begun. I don't even know what clock he was looking at. He was right. There was no clock in front of him facing that way. I mean, he had his iPhone watch, his iWatch thing, Apple Watch, what do you call it, on. But anyway, at some point he said, "Now, don't you think you should be playing the piano now?" And we were having an engaged conversation in a congregation of 30 to 40 people when it's not an event Sunday. You know what I mean? This has no bearing on anyone. We are not live streaming to the nations, whatever. So his personality did remain in that regard. But I wonder if this aligns with anything that you're reading, in that personality. Cindy and I had a beautiful opportunity for Rosalind's 95th. The family asked us to write a song for her and perform it for them for a 95th birthday we had in town. A wonderful artist of Burning Man fame did a beautiful monarch tree sculpture that we installed and dedicated in her honor, all this kind of stuff. So when it came to President Carter's 100th birthday, which was fall of 2024, just a few months before he passed away, Cindy and I and Wayne Kirkpatrick wrote a song for his 100th birthday. And the chorus was just, "Son, you've done well, you've done good, lay it down and go on home." And it's called actually A Starry Crown because in the last chorus, it says, "Lay it on down, a starry crown awaits, go on home." But Cindy, when we got into writing it, she said, "Don't you feel like in some regard, he's probably always been trying to earn his father's love?" And, as Cindy does, she's tapping into the melancholic side of an incredibly fruitful, productive, beautiful, largely joyous, married 77 years by choice, that kind of thing. And I think she was right. He was the oldest son of 4. And in the 1920s and 30s, that carries a certain mantle to it, especially in agriculture, farm, small town, small business life. And I don't know this as a fact, but to some degree, it was a relationship, a very endearing relationship with his father, but one where probably not a lot of expression of "I love you," or maybe even "I'm proud of you." To some degree, that was that time frame of parenting. But does that align at all with the one's kind of dogged determination to do right, to be virtuous? Is it a response as well to a desire to just of being told you've done well? You did good, sit down.
That's a really good question. People often ask, what is the seat of personality? Is it developed by virtue of nurture in family? Is it genetic? Is it, what is it learned, or is it innate?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really have a definitive answer. I think it's both, but I wonder if certain types just really kind of are more weighted toward being innately built, And if I was going to pick a type, maybe be ones and eights, like I think 2s, 3s, and 4s are more created creatures. You know what I mean? Whereas I meet a lot of 1s, a lot of 5s, a lot of 7s and 8s that just seem to come into the world so clearly that way before there were any influences. You know what I mean? Or very few influences. And I remember years ago, a friend of mine sent a picture that his 3-year-old boy had taken all of his trucks. There was like 30 of them, like little cars, like little matchbox cars and things like that, and had parked them perfectly on the living room floor and put them in order by colors, types, and everything. He says, he's 3. And he says, do you think he's a 1? And Dad knew, because Dad was a 1 and was looking at him like, oh boy, I got another one on my hands, And I think there are just some people that come in the world with a certain mantle of personality that is more perhaps innate, and then they experience a lot of approval for showing some of those traits. They just get even more ingrained and more rewarded, when I am this detailed, when I am so focused on being good and being, then I get applause. And so we respond, in ways that would make complete sense. And here we have a guy who is really so one-ish, strong moral inner compass, guided by ethics rather than politics. He lived out his values consistently, whether they were popular or not. He was an idealist who was also very pragmatic. That's very one-ish. There's high ideals, but very practical about how to implement them. And, emotional restraint, calm demeanor, lifetime sense of duty. And that's a big word for ones, duty. Like, this is my duty, is to do these things. And that keeps them oriented so that they don't, like when you see some people's lives who are ones, my life is a 4, your life is a 2, right? It's like this, right? We're kind of like squirreling around, and it's a little bit of a ziggy line. Ones, you have a sense of this, that there's a kind of course that they're on, and they don't deviate very much from that course.
I think that's a very accurate explanation. The through line, Ian, when I zoomed out on all the lessons we included in that book, and I've had some people ask, did you sense a recurring kind of theme in what he was drawing out of whatever scripture passage he was going to for the lesson? And there was this through line of challenging us versus them mentality, a constant challenge that he first would administer, if you will, that challenge to himself in the lesson, and testing his own prejudices, his own biases, and then ask for everyone else to do that. Is that part of that righteous kind of, I know you said they seek justice, but I mean almost a persistence, an insistence of, we are no better, we are no different. We may be diverse, but in regards to equality, we're all on the same playing field.
Yeah, I mean, I think or for ones in general, there is a kind of congruence that has to be in place. It's interesting. There's a story about Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi was a 1, and another famous one. And they often gravitate toward roles of civic leadership because, it's like, I got to fix things that are wrong systemically in order to make a better world. And for everybody, not just for the elite few, right? But for everybody. God, wish that was around nowadays. It seems to me that everybody, the top 0.01% is getting all the perks, and the rest of the world seems to be falling off the grid. But, for ones, there's this kind of congruence where my inner world has to be right. Oh, the Gandhi story. So Gandhi, there's a story about a mother that came to him and said, Mahatma, my son eats too much sugar and his teeth are rotting. And Gandhi said, okay, well, she said, will you talk to him? And he said, yes, bring him back in 2 weeks. She looks a little confused, and she comes back in 2 weeks, and he says, stop eating sugar. And the mother said, thank you, And then she said, why did you wait 2 weeks? And he said, because I had to give up sugar first. So there's that need to be internally consistent with the message, right? Like I can't lie or, dissemble here. I've got to really actually be the person that you're asking me to be. And so it makes perfect sense that he would first direct the critique toward himself before he would want to give it out, start preaching something he wasn't practicing, right? Well, everybody, my friend Andrew Greer, author of the new and wonderful book, More Than a President, Sundays with Jimmy Carter. Where do people get the book and website, all the good stuff?
Sure, absolutely. You can get the book wherever your favorite books are sold, but you can also go to sundayswithjimmycarter.com to find, straight links to Barnes & Noble, to Amazon, as well as to find signed copies or some packages that have some unique President Carter Sunday School archival footage, et cetera, to it. So I would direct everyone to sundayswithjimmycarter.com.
Great. Well, Andrew, thank you for writing such an important book that memorializes Carter's spirituality, but also his personality. Here's a quote from Jimmy Carter that I love. He says, here's 3 quotes from Jimmy Carter that I found. These are all so one-ish. We must adjust to changing times and still hold to unchanging principles. Another one was, my faith demands that I do whatever I can, wherever I can, for as long as I can, with whatever I have, to try to make a difference. And I think that's probably a good way to go out, remembering those words of Jimmy Carter, who as you mentioned before we hit record, I think is 50 years post-presidency, as often happens, we're starting to reflect on many of the good things that he did while a president, but certainly none of us can argue with the fact that post-presidency, he is to us a beacon of what a statesman in his post-office years should be like and do in the world. So thanks for being with us.
Yeah, my pleasure, Ian, Anthony.
Hey, everybody. May you have love. May you have joy. May you have peace. May you have healing. May you have rest. Until next time.